Okay, so thank you for listening to this. I'm speaking as director of the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy here, in the Castle of the Muses in Scotland, with the cat here. No, it's fine. You can have it.
Right.
With the cat here, and with my daughter here, Sophia. Thank you very much for being here. And we've just got back from Turkey. We've had an amazing trip to a beautiful country. And we went on pilgrimage to the shrine in Konya, where Rumi's from. We met some wonderful people. And, I've been studying comparative philosophy for many years. I've just got back from India, just prior to that, meeting a Vaishnava saint, a man called Swami Chaturvedi, going there for the International Peace Bureau, meeting, again, philosophers from all over the planet, people from Russia, Professor Chumakov from the States, Professor Glenn Martin, and many other great thinkers. And we're trying to come up with a kind of model or map for peace on this planet, which I think is very urgently needed. And then I come back and hear the news that this poor Jordanian pilot has been set ablaze, right? Trapped in a cage, and it's all over the YouTube and films. I just feel the need to speak out about this, because this kind of level of cruelty that's going on, violence, has got to stop. It's totally unacceptable in a civilized world. And I'm speaking as international coordinator of International Philosophers of Peace, and also as director of the Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy. I've spent about 40 years, actually, studying comparative global philosophy, and I know that it is possible for us, as one planet, to coexist with all our different civilizations and religions. That's what my work as a lecturer at the University of London and the University of Oxford, and as a teacher of RE in schools in the UK system for 10 years. And my work in peace studies internationally has been about for the last 20 years. And then prior to that, my undergraduate and PhD work, and many years also studying as a private scholar. And not only that, but as an experimental mystic. As a student of comparative spirituality, I've also sat at the feet of many great saints and sages and living masters. I've met many Sufis, I've met many Jewish rabbis, many Christian saints and mystics, and Buddhist and Hindu and Jain and pagan and Druid and all the rest of it. And after a lifetime of searching, I can really say that it is possible for each of these great traditions to coexist in peace and harmony. At their best, they all teach a universal approach to spirituality and to wisdom and to knowledge. We're all human beings, we're all Homo sapiens. Knowledge, sapience, wisdom is what makes us important and special. And if you take a spiritual perspective on this, it's knowledge that's acquired not just in one lifetime, but in many lifetimes. That's what the Jains, the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Sufis, the Kabbalists, the Druids, and so on affirm. So the question I'm looking at is, why are we still doing these cruel acts to each other? Why are we immolating people? I mean, this chap, okay, he was shot down. It's a war situation. He's a pilot. The rules of international war should apply, the Geneva Convention. You don't, burn pilots alive. You look after prisoners of war. Just as if people captured an ISIS prisoner, they would look after them. I mean, it's a horrible situation. The thing is to stop the war happening. But if we do have to have these wars, then we have to stick by basic rules. In the Islamic code, you stick by the rules that govern jihad, and you certainly don't immolate prisoners. You respect them, you keep them alive, and you do a prisoner swap later. And every other civilization has rules of warfare in place, which we have to abide by. So the problem then is manifold. I just want to do a little short talk about how, as a philosopher, specializing in peace and peace policy, we can solve this problem in the Middle East, and particularly in Iraq and Syria. And I'm speaking also as chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East. And I've interviewed many people and made films and documentaries about the visions of people for peace. I think the first observation is to say that it's important the voices of peace are not drowned out by the voices of cruelty and violence. This is a problem that's always affected mankind, generation after generation. If you go back into history, at the time of the Chinese Empire, the time of the great Chinese dynasties. There were always voices of peace, and then there were voices of the warlords, the cynics, the real politic people. They were called legalists, the ones who use might and fear to govern. There have always been on this planet individuals, people, visionaries, sages who've spoken for the other way, the way of the Tao, the way of non-violence, the way of ahimsa, the law of love. And that struggle in human history is there as a historian. If you go back into history of global societies, each of them has that voice of sanity and peace and non-violence, and it has the cynics, the men of violence. That's also a struggle within each one of us. We have both those voices inside everyone on this planet. We have to choose individually to give strength to the voice of reason and the voice of love and the voice of non-violence. That's the struggle we must do daily. Okay, in our personal interactions with our friends, with our family, with and our internal monologue, our internal journey. That is what Muhammad called the greater jihad. That's the true struggle of spirituality. It's what the Jains, the Buddhists, the yogis, the Gnostics, the mystics talk about. It's that inner, that bringing to the fore of our own inner peace. Okay. And there are many, as it were, demons, to use the phrase that St. Anthony used, in the desert. You know, you can be assailed by doubt, by cynicism, by depression, by I haven't got enough of X, you know, money, friendship, whatever. We're all walking around with these demons, and sometimes they overwhelm us, and then we project onto an external enemy. It's all the fault of X. The reason that I don't have enough is because of the X, whatever it is, you know. And that, I think, is the mistake the ISIS people have made. They're projecting onto the West, America, etc., all the kind of things that they find lacking in their own society. And then think that if they just attack and destroy and are cruel to the West and anyone that supports the West, that's the way to the promised land. That's the way to build true Islam on the planet. Well, I don't think it is, with all due respect. It's a foolish strategy, and it's a psychologically very immature strategy. You can't demonize the other. I mean, I'm giving a talk in Oxford in a few weeks' time about the nature of the devil and the history of attitudes of the devil. I think this is very relevant to what is facing the global agenda at the moment. If we continue to demonize the other and call them the devil, working for the devil, then there's no hope of us getting peace. We have to build an inclusive psychology, a transpersonal psychology that includes the other and all the others. You know, as human beings, there's 7 billion of us on this planet. We are so diverse, so complex, so multicultural, multi-faith, and multi-dimensional. You know, the physical body that you see is not the whole story. Each one of us, I believe, is a soul being incarnate in a physical body, and with a mental body and a psychic body and a spiritual body and so on. All the wisdom traditions of the planet affirm that. So we're multi-dimensional beings in incarnation on a marvellous planet in which we can learn to celebrate our diversity and to share the resources of abundance that are here on the planet, Mother Nature, you know, the mountains. Here in Scotland, where I'm recording this, we have this incredible landscape. In Cappadocia in Turkey, where I've just returned from, again, incredible primal landscapes of these ash-domed lava buildings that have been hewn out of the landscape. I would have thought it's enough for us to be doing on this planet, to celebrating life, to celebrating existence, to sharing that together. And as the book of Genesis says, you know, Adam's job is to give names to that which is in nature. So that's what thinkers do. That's what we all do. We learn to speak, we learn to write, we learn to describe reality and ultimately to praise reality. It's the job of the scholar or the scientist in defining, you know, breaking existence down into the minutiae is ultimately the same as the mystic or the philosopher, which is to wonder at it. Aristotle said philosophy is started with wonder. thavma in Greek. Well, I 100% agree. We need to wonder at existence, the beauty of existence, the beauty of the diversity. And this is where the different branches of knowledge have come from: geography, history, philosophy, religious studies, physics, chemistry. All the branches of knowledge are attempts to explain that incredible rich diversity of being. My concern about the oversimplistic theology that ISIS seems to be coming from, and their equivalents, any group that uses extreme violence and terrorism to make its point politically or religiously, I think is in danger philosophically of trying to radically oversimplify existence. Existence is wonderfully rich, fecund and complex. And that's obviously how it's intended to be. Now, all the sacred scriptures of mankind, and I have studied them all in enormous detail, right, for many, many years. I can affirm this, and I can prove it as a scholar, and affirm it as a thinker. All the sacred scriptures of mankind agree on one thing: that everything that is in manifestation at any given time, comes from the one source, and that source is good. You can call that God, Allah, Yahweh, Vishnu, Keridwen, Apollo. There are a million names. Every tribe culture has myriads of names. Those are all different angles, like the camera picks up the same image from different angles and you call it a different thing. It's all made of light. Let's use this as a way of explaining. So when you take the camera image from one angle, it looks like Allah. And you zone in through the cultural landscape of the early Islamic community, of Muhammad, of the community in Mecca and Medina, and the first Muslims. But before that, they're using the word Allah, which was already there in Arabian culture. They're using the mantric, powerful sound that is represented by that, which goes right back into pagan prehistory in Arabian culture. If you look at ancient Greek thought, again, you look at reality from another angle. It's Apollo. It has a different flavour. But Apollo is effectively, in many ways, overlapping with Allah. There might even be an etymological connection going back into Bronze Age prehistory. If my work on the Kabbalah runes is true, as I believe it is, and I think scholarship will and has begun to move in this direction, the Indo-European language and the Semitic languages, Hamito-Semitic, are coming from a similar route way back in prehistory. So Apollo, Allah probably come back from an ancient common source ultimately. And we're talking about the God of light, the one who does healing and prophecy, and who cares for mankind sufficiently that prophets come into the world. Prophecy is in the domain of Apollo, just as it is in the domain of Allah. And philosophy is also in the domain of Apollo. Aristotle, whose father was a physician to Philip of Macedon, was descended from a line of priest healers, the Asclepiads, descended from Asclepius, who was the son of Apollo in ancient Bronze Age Greek mythology. And there must be some kind of historical basis to these Greek myths. That's my considered opinion after many years of studying them and trying to understand them historically and chronologically. So Apollo Lysius was Apollo in his light form, and this is why Aristotle founded the Lyceum in a place dedicated to Apollo Lysius. And Aristotle's God, therefore, is Apollo of the light bringer, the one who brings healing, the one who sorts out medically the complexity of ideas. This is what philosophy is about. It's about comprehending the categories under which reality presents itself. Aristotle, in some of the texts that have come down, and we don't have the oral teachings of Aristotle, unless, like Rudolf Steiner, you believe you can kind of tune into them, and I think there is some validity to that we can read what theosophists call the Akashic records of great thinkers from the past. So these categories that Aristotle said there were 10 of is a way of comprehending reality. The Kabbalah gives us 10 Sephiroth. It's another way of comprehending reality. The Sufis talk about the 99 names of the beloved, the 99 names of God. Again, it's a way of describing the totality of being. Now, but the fecundity of the names is further proof of the beauty of the unity. You know, what we mustn't have is a battle between multiplicity, pluralism, and unity, simplicity. Philosophically, we have to make a peace treaty here between manifestation, what Chinese call the 10,000 things, the many names of God, and the silent unity into which they all revert, the Tao. We need a peace treaty between, in a sense, what Sartre called being and nothingness, right? And the thing is, it's already there. It's been mapped out by the very greatest thinkers that this planet has known, generation after generation. All we have to do is study it and reawaken and relive those insights of these previous great sages. Now, every culture and civilization has these sages and saints, without exception, and I can report that as a traveller of the history of ideas for many, many years. I've also travelled physically in about 36 countries, meeting people, talking, giving lectures, studying in libraries. You know, I'm a scholar. Maida of Paradise is a huge library. I've been in dozens of libraries around the planet, incredible places, including the Vatican Library, to which I have a reader's ticket, which is an amazing place. And many, many years of study have taught me that every culture has this secret knowledge that there is a peace between the invisible and the visible. The invisible comes from the invisible, but it comes through love. It comes because manifestation is a process of fecund revelation of goodness. And there shouldn't be a war. We shouldn't be impatient to get back to the one from the many. Enjoy the journey, enjoy being informed, but know that you are held always in the arms of the beloved. Each one of us is special and precious and treasured. Like Christ said, not a hair falls from our head, but, you know, the Almighty knows that. There is a kind of omniscient Buddha field around all the diversity of being that holds us and supports us. Each one of us has to contact that in order to attain peace on a personal level. Now that's what actually true Islam means. It means surrender to that one source, the beloved, as in an embrace of mutual recognition. And that's at the secret heart of all faiths. That's what Buddha meant when he said, find nirvana. You know, give up all your wanting, your desire, your outer wants, like I want this, I want that, I desire this, I desire that. Surrender it all. Go back to the void, the silent, still allness, and you realize that you have everything. By having the nothingness, you attain that nirvana of realizing that you have enlightenment. What more could you possibly want? Because everything that you can possibly have, all the greatest works of art, the most incredible houses, palaces, costumes, music, you know, all the good things in life, in manifestation, that we bring out of our creative access to the realm of the muses, come from that place of inspiration, that place of enlightenment. That's where Beethoven went to get his music, it's where Rumi went to get his poetry, it's where Shakespeare went to get his plays. It's where all the great creative artists of mankind have gone. And if you reach that place, then you can just paddle in the shores of that divine beauty. That was what Buddha was saying. Go to nirvana, everything else is added to you. Which was Christ's point. You know, go for the kingdom of God, he said. Don't go for this or that amusement, or this or that desire or want, or this or that status, or this or that power, or this or that hunger that you think you have, or you know, in humility, surrender to the beloved, to God, and look for the kingdom of God, and then everything else comes to you anyway. Because it's all made of love, right? I mean, there's a very great Scottish philosopher, Thomas Troward, who was born in India. We're celebrating his day today at the castle here, who studied in India for many years. He was a judge, actually, in the old Raj. And He studied comparative world religions, metaphysics. He came to an understanding of the unity behind them all. He gave some Edinburgh lectures that are very famous. And like Emerson, he proposed this new thinking for mankind, that we should realise that we come from this universal divine source, which is a shared common intellectual sort of beauty that we all share and radiate. There should be no competition between this or that religion. They're all paths and ladders and tools for us to access the actual experience. It's the actual experience of enlightenment that we should be encouraging each other to have. I mean, when I was 19 and discovered Mahayana Buddhism and took a vow of bodhisattvahood, the idea is that you reach personal enlightenment, but everybody does too. You can't do it alone. It's like Indra's net. You all reflect enlightenment. So as more people on the planet become enlightened, so that encourages other people. And I still think that formula is the correct formula to get world peace. As we increase the quotient of enlightenment on the planet, so we increase the peace quotient. The question then is, what is preventing that? Why are the terrorist people like ISIS, whatever, still blocking that access to enlightenment? I think it's out of fear and out of poverty. People that don't have maybe very much education, have never had the opportunity to study all different faiths and paths, who have never been able to travel very much, who've never had access to books and libraries, who've never been able to study, exotic religions, Chinese, Buddhist, Hindu, etc., let alone, ancient wisdom paths and so on. They've only maybe walked one spiritual path, and then they become very fixated on it. They think it's the only one. And obviously, if your home is conquered, and Iraq is conquered by American troops in 2003 with British troops, and you see, bombs dropping out of the sky, and maybe your friends die and your relatives, it must be a nightmare. I completely understand why these people are very, very upset. What I would say to them, and what I would say to all my Islamic friends and colleagues, is the path of violence, the path of the sword, is not the solution to the problems that the world is facing, least of all in the Middle East. The path of brotherhood and sisterhood and truth and non-violence, the true jihad, the spiritual work to hear the voice of goodness still. Instead of killing that pilot, those people could have listened to him and realised this is not a bad man. This is actually a good man having to do some bad stuff for his country. His father seems like a good man. He's been very upset at the cruel and horrible death of his son. And Jordanians are incredibly beautiful people, in my experience. I've known some Jordanians. They're incredible people. The Arab soul is a noble soul at heart, not a cruel soul. This was the question that Lawrence of Arabia faced when he had to go and work with the Arabs during World War One. And some people said, no, don't work with the Arabs. They're not to be trusted. They're untrustworthy. They're vicious, backstabbers. And he said, no, I'm going to trust them. I'm going to be 100%, truthful with them, and we'll see how far we get. I think that every culture has good and bad in it. And it would be ridiculous to say that all English people are bad or good, or all Arabs are bad or good, or all Americans are bad or good. We all have these voices inside us. We all have to make that struggle so that the best voice comes forward. And this is where our spiritual teachers should be helping and giving assistance. I really don't know what the Muslim imams and theologians are doing at the moment with the ISIS team. It seems to me you've come astray, with all due respect. And, the whole Al-Qaeda, the whole sort of hardening. I mean, the Wahhabi oversimplification of Islam is, I think, problematic. And as a scholar of Islam, I think that true Islam is much more generous than the God of the Wahhabi narrowing. I think that the true Islam is inclusive rather than exclusive. Islam includes the Shias, it includes the Ismailis, it includes the Sufis, it includes all the varieties of the schools of the Sunnis. It includes places and types of Islam that, very, very diverse, all the way from Central Asia to Southeast Asia to the West, where there are many Muslims now living. Each person has a right to reinterpret and recalibrate their relationship with the absolute in their own, according to their own experience and their own needs. That's part of the generosity of God. Okay. And so for each person, in a sense, we all have to do our own peace treaty with the divine. I don't think it includes the killing of others. I don't think we have a right to judge another. We do have a right to defend ourselves. And this is one thing that Muhammad and many prophets have said. You shouldn't attack anybody. You should not use violence. But if you're attacked, you have a right to self-defense. Well, these people burning the Jordanian pilot are not exercising that right. They're being unspeakably cruel. Prisoners have rights under international law. The question then is, what does the international community do about it? Well, I can only speak for philosophers. I think what we should do is continue to study, continue to teach, to try and work with the thinkers behind these movements and gently try and point out that they're in error. This is a philosophical struggle. And there are so many brilliant, intelligent, incredibly enlightened Muslim theologians on the planet who should be telling their brothers and sisters, look, this is an error. You shouldn't do that kind of cruelty. So that's one thing we can do. As diplomats, we should be working internationally with the diplomatic community to isolate these people, these fanatics, and building alliances through the UN. If there has to be a military intervention, which there may have to be eventually, then it should be done under UN auspices with full approval and discussion of the Security Council. It's in the interest of every nation state in the UN system to ensure that these kind of rogue, violent criminals, which is in effect what they are, you can warn them, you can try and educate them, you can offer them enlightenment, you can say this is the herb of immortality, like Ibn Pishtim. But if they refuse, if they continue to wreck the playroom, if they continue to terrorize and attack people because of different faiths and Yazidis and Shias and so on, then you do actually eventually have to intervene. But it must be done with the full force of the UN, with international legality. It's not up to Jordan, for instance, this one little nation state, to take on ISIS. It's not up to Japan, who's also just lost one of their journalists. He seemed, again, a very good man. He was ruthlessly beheaded by ISIS. And this has been going on for far too long. So I think the Sunnis, I think the Wahhabis, the people in Saudi Arabia have to cut off all the funding. That's another thing that can be done. In Qatar and elsewhere, all the funding to ISIS has to be cut off. Immediately. There's no prevarication here. Authentic Sunni Islam itself is in a moral dilemma if it continues to support that degree of fanaticism. That was never the intention of Islam. That was never the intention of the Prophet. And the great seers and sages who've carried Islam and the Sunni tradition of Aisha and so on, that whole lineage is completely antithetical to those notions of cruelty and violence. So what we should be having is also a peace treaty between Shia and Sunni Islam. And we should be having an interfaith peace treaty between all the religions of the planet. This is what I'm working for, with the notion, then we can reopen the Golden Gate in Jerusalem. We can get a two-state solution to Palestine. And we can choose the joyous path for history instead of the terrorist path. We can choose history to have a happy ending, instead, like a comedy, instead of a tragic ending. The same applies in Ukraine, where we have wars going on that are needless, and the great sages of Ukrainian culture are so much beyond that stupidity and that level of ignorance. So Russian, Ukrainian, Western European thinkers can help the diplomats to solve these problems. So anyway, that's the strategy. That's what we're doing here at the Castle of the Muses. And I send blessings and love here from Scotland to all those who listen to this. And please just pray that our brothers and sisters in these conflict zones around the world reach a level of enlightenment where they can just let that go and realize they've been in error. Give it up, turn back to the light and come back home to where you really belong, which is, in a sense, to the God beyond God. The God of philosophers, the God of Aristotle, is the authentic one behind, the gods of exoteric religion. And just to finish, there's this beautiful book I've just been looking at, The Feats of the Knowers of God, about Rumi's background and his father and so on. Turn to scholarship, turn to the pen, which is mightier than the sword, and join the dance of the knowers of God instead of fighting and killing and using the sword. So, salam. Thank you.